all have expertise, is that there are many people in the chat who might be able to answer before even a moderator sees it. So if you can help us out and also get your responses faster from our large community and use that regular chat, the room chat, that would be really, really helpful. Behind the mics today on Cohort is myself, Jessica Jackson. I am the xAPI Cohort host. You can find me in Slack. You can find me on email. You can find me here every week at 2 p.m. We have Megan Torrance. You want to give him a little wave? And that is our very own xAPI evangelist. And she is very knowledgeable and here to help you in the chat if you do have any questions. So that's why we're using that room chat. We have Aaron Steller, who is one of our producers, and Jamie Washington, who is our second producer. If you have any tech questions, technical needs, that's where you're going to be using the Q&A chat. You can reach out to them directly for some support. So, like I said, we've been moving through this curriculum for the semester. We've been learning about what xAPI is, how to send it from e-learning tools, how to send it from things that are not e-learning. We learned about the LRS and the new learning ecosystem last week. And now we're hopping into a conversation about making the business case for xAPI and getting some of that buy-in. With that, next week we'll hop into looking at xAPI profiles. But today we're going to focus on getting that buy-in, leveraging some of the amazing capabilities of xAPI, and Jeff is very knowledgeable about that. I heard some really cool concepts even before this session started. So with that, I'm going to pass it right over to you, Jeff. Thanks for being here today, and it's all yours.
Jess, thank you. Megan, thank you, and thank everyone in the cohort for having me. It really is a thrill to be here. I love what you guys are doing. I've been in e-learning about 25 years, and learning analytics has been something I've been actively involved in, and of course, always frustrated with, because there's never enough and not enough information that tells you what you want to know. And the fact that there's so much enthusiasm here for this is, it just makes me happy. So I hope you all enjoy this. The topic today is about making the business case for xAPI. And when I sat down to think about the presentation, I said to myself, well, there's a very wide range of experience and skills here, and also a very wide range of projects. So it's very hard to give advice about a specific project without the context and the detail. So I said to myself that I would go more for the macro trends that tell you why not for a specific project, but in general, xAPI is really good, and the direction that you want to be taking your organization over time. So this is my nice headshot. There you go. And where you can find me if you so desire. So the 30,000-foot view. And this I will elucidate in the next half hour or so. So, xAPI, and maybe one day its successor standards, is absolutely vital to a learning ecosystem for a couple of reasons. One, it's about the learning trends and the way learning systems are evolving. And that's responding to a couple other important trends. In the backdrop is the move to cloud, which has changed a lot of things for almost every system, but for learning in particular. And then three things that have emerged from this move to cloud. One is that the LMS is no longer the monolithic thing that it used to be. A lot of learning has been decoupled from the LMS, and it lives now in third-party systems like LinkedIn Learning, or it lives in the intranet, or it lives in other places that no longer are part of the LMS proper. The second thing that's important here is, in the backdrop, is the increasing speed of work. And that requires an agile content development process that can then easily create content at scale that can send off the relevant learning analytics. And that's not an easy problem to solve. And thirdly, that the economy of skills has changed radically, right? It used to be you learn something up front for 4 years in college, maybe 2 more years in grad school, and then you worked for 60 years. And that, of course, hasn't been the reality for years. But still, through the aughts, people were saying, well, maybe you go to college, you work for 10 years, you go back for 2 more years, you work for 10 years, you go back for 2 more years. And that you'd have these kinds of interspersed retraining moments. But things have sped up so fast that even that's not an option. We are now in a world where it needs to be continuous learning and continuous training. And then these three factors have become even more critical now with COVID, which has accelerated everything even faster. So that's sort of the backdrop, and I'll get into the details here in a minute. But that's the very high level of why xAPI has become so critical. So first off, I'll start with a story. And as all stories are, it's a bit of a fable, right? It's never actually quite like this, but in general, it's more or less the story. So in the old days, this is how learning looked like. You had a bunch of stuff happening in the classroom, and then you had an LMS, and you had other stuff that was created in there, or you were bringing in SCORM packages. That was most of it. So there was a lot of work in the classroom. Content creation was pretty slow. And the best way to scale things was to import these content modules. There was not a lot of outcome tracking, except for critical things like compliance. Sexual harassment, materials handling, this kind of stuff that was just mandatory, and it was a yes or no. You did it or you didn't. After training, whether it was classroom or in the LMS, there was this long period of time, and managers would kind of judge your progress periodically at unclear periods, maybe after a quarter, maybe after a year, maybe after 2 years. But there was no link to what you were doing and what your performance was and that learning that happened maybe years ago. And there was no real sense of how skills could build on each other into something that was a coherent sort of career path. So then things began changing. And to elucidate this a bit, I want to actually hop over to higher ed, because higher ed was a little bit ahead of corporate learning in one aspect of this, which was the decoupling of not only content, but learning systems from the LMS. So higher ed, really from the aughts, has looked something like this on the left. At the bottom of the stack was what's known as the SIS, or the Student Information System. Right? That's your just student directory and what classes they're in. That was fed into the LMS, which assigned students to classes. Right? And the LMS was the front-end system that students and teachers would log into and do their class. That's where you put the syllabus. That's where you'd have some collaboration. You'd have a discussion board. You might have a Dropbox for assignments. You might post some PDFs. But then almost entirely, the rest of the learning was done in these other systems that you were launched into from the LMS. And the reason higher ed had to do this very early was because of the size of the course catalog. There was no way to teach chemistry and dance and literature and musicology, right, in the same system. You needed specialized systems that could actually do things like, showing how you draw notes, right, on a musical staff, or turning a chemistry object in 3 dimensions, right? So quickly, these what are generically called tools arose around the LMS. And some of those tools were content specific, often made by publishers like Pearson or McGraw-Hill. So the McGraw-Hill French learning module, or the Pearson chemistry module. And some of those tools were generic functionalities, like a video platform, or a virtual conference platform, or a survey system, etc. And there was a standard that arose called LTI, which was to make the handshake between the LMS and these various tools. But that happened very early. And the move to cloud was very natural for higher ed for that reason. Things may have started on-prem, but they moved to cloud pretty quickly. That was the easiest way to manage this. So the next thing I want to mention is a thing that happened with software development. You've probably heard more or less the story, but in the old days, write software by this long process of specification. They go through all the use cases, they document all the error conditions, all the things that should happen if something goes wrong, and then they would hand that spec off to a developer who would then build a person who would check it, and then it would go live. And this was called the waterfall methodology because it was always in stages. And as cloud emerged, and as the speed of technology emerged, something happened, which was that by the time you sat and did that entire specification, 1 month, 2 months, whatever, and then handed it off to development, 1 month, 2 months, whatever, and then the QA, and then deployment, the thing was already out of date. So obviously that's not going to work going forward because of the speed of business. So there arose what are called Agile methodologies, and there's various ones, but the details don't matter as much as the fact that the only way to have something, a product at the end, that isn't already obsolete by the time it's released, is to do it in very small chunks in an iterative fashion, where you build something that's responsive, and then you add to it, and then you add to it, and then you add to it. Now, why am I telling you this? Well, because learning content creation has exactly the same problem. In the old days, when learning content creation could be slow, because the training materials could last a couple of years, right? You could take a month or 2 months to make your training material in a waterfall fashion. That world's mostly gone. If you take a month to write it, and then a month to develop it, it's already out of date. So we need to move toward Agile for training content. And this means that the training, the learning data needs to be in a way that permits this rapid content creation with a standard set of messages or metrics or whatever you want to call them, that you can rapidly create this content and know that you'll get relevant data from it at the end. Third thing, what's happened in the training environment? Well, so of course, classrooms have been on the out for a while. Some people still use them, but meaning they've gotten to a point where classrooms are too expensive. You got to house people and travel and whatever. Those are getting less important over time. And instead, we've been moving more toward web-based, but in 2 different ways. Some of the commodity online training, things like how to use Word, how to use Excel, even like some of the programming stuff, how to program basically in Python, right? How to do basic data analysis, how to use R, right? That kind of commodity content is now mostly now in the hands of training content companies, like LinkedIn Learning. It started as Lynda, and LinkedIn bought it, and other companies in a similar position, because that training really is commoditized now. And then the other part of that is content that is now company or job specific. And that now is often being delivered either asynchronously in an LMS or some other system, or synchronously sort of live over the web. In both of these cases, we need a way to track performance and track the not just of the people, but also track the value of the content, and is it working right? So it's got to work for stuff you do internally and stuff you bring in externally. Again, what does this mean? That you can't build one-off hooks to your own content, right? And if a developer tells you, well, I'll just do an ETL of data from this system and put it into an LRS, well, fine, but you've lost the other half of your training material, which is that you have these commodity type producers out there, which are going to be a lot of your material. So this just goes over the three trends I mentioned at the beginning. Number one, the decoupling of things from the LMS. The speed of work, which is requiring a speed of content development that needs a standardized way to get information out of it that any content author can use and can use quickly. And the fact now that we have third parties that create content. So anything you do internally needs a correlative way to get data out of these third parties whose systems you don't own. And then one last note. What's been happening with human capital management and the employee life cycle? So this has become critical now because now everyone assumes that employees will not be there for life, right? We're in a faster moving economy. The whole process around hiring, onboarding, training, developing, and then at some point that person moves on has required not only more speed, but more systems that know more about individuals and from more places, as we'll see in the next slide. So this becomes now that cycle where it's no longer even periodic training. It's got to be constant training all the time. And this means you need constantly updated data about what skills people have, what skills they would like to have, what path they could be on, or what's a likely path for them to be on given their skill set. Potentially what are not likely paths for them to be on given their skill set, as you counsel them through the journey in your organization, or in some cases counsel them out, depending on things. So that's a reality. All right, so this all leads up to things, how they kind of look today, or if not today, becoming like this today or in the very near future. So you no longer have that single LMS. What you have is probably something that looks more like this. You've got an LMS that does some things. You're probably licensing some content from LinkedIn or some other third party to take care of the generic commodity stuff. You probably have training elsewhere on properties you do own, like intranet. You probably have third-party systems that are cloud-based services that may do all and sundry things, including things like VR. Why would you ever build a one-off solution to your learning analytics? It doesn't make any sense, right? It's not the future. It's not scalable. And it's not going to get you the data you need from all the sources in a rapid time frame to allow you to move people through your organization to get them the skills they need, ways that are good fits for them, and make you a successful business. That's why you need xAPI. And it's data from all these sources that go to your LRS. And you may even, by the way, have what's now in the parlance as an LXP, Learning Experience Platform, which is usually Degreed or Edcast, or there's like a number out there now. And the point of an LXP largely is to be a unifying workflow layer on top of all of these sources. Because now you can't just send someone to the LMS. That's no longer where people live. They now live first in the LXP. And from there, they go to the LMS or LinkedIn Learning or your intranet or your VR companion or what have you. So this is the architecture of the future. Or it may be now. You may be already there.
So Jeff, before you go away,
yeah,
there's a request in the chat Someone would like to just like, you just dropped a great big kind of like concept bomb here.
Yeah.
Could you do me a favor, just like give us the, before you move on to your next,
Yeah.
right? Do this one again.
Absolutely. And the last step, and then I'll do it again, is that the final thing down here is HCM. So HCM stands for Human Capital Management. In the old days, it was called an HRIS, a Human Resources Information System, right? Which was basically your name, your demographic information, your kids, your spouse, what insurance plan you had, how much you got paid, and who your manager was. Right, that was it in the old days. But as I mentioned up here, the evolution of skills management is evolving to the point where now we need to be getting data to be able to put people on paths and know much more about them, what they're certified for, what they could be certified for, which trainings they've taken, which trainings they've come in with. And that's what an HCM is built to do. In fact, by the way, some HCMs even have an LMS built inside of them, like Oracle Learning. So the ultimate end goal of a lot of this is that some segment of the data in the LRS will find its way back to the HCM. And that's how you complete the loop of understanding the skills and then moving people into the next level of their skills. All right, let me take a step back. So confluence of a couple of events. Number one, decoupling of things from the LMS, right? Content and indeed systems, right? No LMS understands VR, for instance, right? So cloud and these cloud systems has been a reality for a long time. And all that content has been decoupled, including third-party content like LinkedIn Learning. That's thing number one. That's why, by the way, these LXPs arose, because you suddenly had what you see here in the main line, which is an LMS, LinkedIn Learning, third-party stuff, stuff in your intranet, stuff in VR, etc. All right, but that's the first thing that happened. And for that, I gave the example of what happened in higher ed, because that happened to higher ed very early in its evolution, 20 years ago. That's happened now, recently, or more recently, with corporate learning. Because things that are very specific, like VR, or things that are that are technologically specific, like VR, or have a very specific content to them, often need an extra system to manage it that the LMS can't handle. Secondly, we have the agility and the speed of content development, which I left off this chart for reasons of simplicity. But of course, there's a content creation process here that's feeding, at minimum, your LMS. And the speed of that needs to be such that those content packages, whether they're in Articulate or whatever you're using, you have a reliable, standardized way that you can hire people, hire outsource companies, right? Create at speed and know you're going to get good data. So you can't build a piece and then talk to a programmer about getting data out of it. It's not going to work. The next thing is the move to third-party content. So as classrooms have gone away, things have moved to a combination of third-party content and homegrown content. That third-party content needs to be such that it can send data as well. Which means for the homegrown content, you cannot build it yourself, your messaging. Because you need a way that you can get data out of not only your homegrown content, but also that standardized content from LinkedIn Learning. That's why you need, in this new world of corporate systems, xAPI, that can get data from every single thing on this list, including the LXP. Pull it into the LRS, and then, if desired, complete the loop by pulling that data back into an HCM. How's that? Good? All right. That was, in fact, a good place to pause, because that, in fact, was the end of the story. really quickly, I want to say just two more things, and then we'll see if there are questions. So I'm really glad to hear that some folks have been playing in deep with Kaltura xAPI, which is fantastic. I was going to say briefly, while it's in your head, you've probably already seen some of the stuff you can get from our on-demand video and our live classroom video. We also have a live broadcast capabilities. But I'm thrilled to hear that you're playing with this. I'd love to see what your results are at the end of the day, because it's really super cool. Because video is now such an important part of learning development that it's critical to have people who know how to work with this. Finally, summary. So the future of the future of learning is cloud, agile, distributed, and rapid. While the end goal of learning is, of course, performance in the long term, you need to understand engagement and get data in the short term. Get it immediately, because the training cycle is now weeks, not years. And that needs xAPI. To optimize the content creation process, you need something that you can standardize on, have anybody use, and not need any kind of development customization. If you need a new data point, you need to put it, you can add it to your content and it'll work. You can't call your developers every time and say, can you please add this new field to the ETL? To grab data from third-party content, which you need to combine with data from your first-party content, you need xAPI. Or you're only looking at half your training data. Of course, this is important to track the ROI of those third-party systems. You may find that no one's using LinkedIn Learning or whatever else you purchased. Sort of a high-level business question. To track and plan skills. If you're going to use this kind of analysis and get data back into the HCM, see where users are and what paths they should be on, you need all that data. You need xAPI. And by the way, to give you a long term, meaning more than 6 months from now, of where HR technology should be in a year if we're good. People in HR should be able to look in their HCM and say, in 3 years and in 5 years, as best I can know at this point in time, we're going to need this many employees with these skills and this many employees with those skills. Here's our current state today. What do we need to do as an HR organization to get here? Who must we upskill? Who must we hire? That's the end game. And with xAPI, this is now possible. And now we just got to put it into practice, which is easy, of course. So at the end of the day, if you really want the high-performing learning ecosystem that will make your company, that will give your company that competitive edge, because it is now a skills economy, you must have xAPI. And if you want some proof points, even before COVID, Google AT&T's investment in learning, Google PwC's investment in learning, they each announced within the scope of about a month, I want to say a year ago, billion-dollar investments with a B in upskilling. Well, at the time, of course, the unemployment rate was so low that there was no one left to hire, right? The only option you have is upskilling. Things are a bit, in flux now with COVID, but you're still going to need skilled people, and those people, or the skilled people, don't exist today, and that's ultimately the why of everything we're doing here. So, with that, I will take questions for however long Jess says we have.
So we have about 9 minutes for questions. And I think that Megan had a few.
Yeah, I've got a few. By all means, drop some in the chat also. Jeff, most of the questions that have been asked along the way, the beautiful thing about Cohort is that Cohort has a lot. I mean, the richness of Cohort is that we have a lot of answers. So a lot of the things that have gone by in chat have been answered. So I have a couple more, and I know there'll be some others coming out. You mentioned something slightly dangerous around here, which I love, was that xAPI is not the last specification to come around, right?
Yeah.
And I've had people say, well, how do I know to commit to xAPI? Because, well, won't there be something afterwards? Of course there will be. Can you talk to me just what you've seen over your career, kind of where you feel xAPI fits in the progression and what you think might be needed to improve it or replace it?
Yeah, sure. So here's the best thing about xAPI is that it's really, really well structured by people who do this for a living, namely programmers, right? They do this, this is what they do. And programmers in the cloud world are also really good at one thing, that is backward compatibility. So whatever happens next, and there will be at the governance level, there'll be a bit of time because now ADL has turned over governance to IEEE, and some of the original pushers are doing other things. I guarantee you that backward compatibility will be requirement number one for whatever happens. Also, I can say that xAPI is pretty flexible. So, for instance, I also play in the IMS Global team, and they have a standard called IMS Caliper, which I think I saw on one of the things coming up. So IMS Caliper is a little more targeted at the learning ecosystem because it's sort of the counterpart of LTI in a way. Leverages the same authentication, that kind of thing. And so that's become a little more popular in the EDU ecosystem. But the two groups have been talking the entire time about, do we get a crosswalk between Caliper and xAPI? Do we have a mapping, whatever? What's probably going to happen, and don't quote me on this because it isn't done yet, is that Caliper will probably become a profile of xAPI. So what that means is, you can always, one option is always to say, we're going to keep the system handshake, we're going to change, these profiles in these ways, but I guarantee you it's going to be backward compatible. So, to be honest, I have not spent a lot of time with CMI5. That's on my list of things to do that I always say I'll do and never get to. But I guarantee you it will be interoperable.
We can hook you up.
Awesome, great.
With CMI5. So my next question, and you may want to come back. We've got a panel. We've got a project team working on the intersection of HR Open and the xAPI, and have a panel coming up on kind of the multiple specs really that are all looking at people learning, performing, and all of those things. So I have to confess, the reason why I thought you would be such a great speaker for
And
Cohort,
you were wrong.
well, I can admit, no, just kidding. You're fantastic. No, was something you actually haven't mentioned at all. And so we were talking, you and I, August, July-ish, and we were talking about why did Kaltura and Neuro make the decision to add xAPI. Do you remember what your answer was?
I think so, which was that it was really easy for us to do it.
and it was, and actually even more than that. And then I'm going to let you kind of riff on this and explain your thing. Was you said, well, why wouldn't we? It's just another data stream.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, so speaking now as a xAPI provider, I mean, and I say to everyone, you should of course, be an xAPI provider. So here's the thing. When I first joined Kaltura, xAPI was my first project. I said, we have to do this. And the reason I said we have to do this is, and I've been in tech at various companies for a long time, and working together, interoperability has always been a huge priority of mine, is that Kaltura has all this data. I mean, scads of it. I mean, and stuff people don't want to pull by our own API because quality of experience, quality of service, I mean, browser type, I mean, stuff that has zero relationship to learning. People much prefer if I just send them the key bits of information they actually want to know about what the learner did and if they got a question right or wrong and that kind of thing. And so I said, look, we already have the data. This is just a packaging standard. And the challenge with most learning providers is not xAPI. It's having the data in the first place. Once you've got the data, it's a complete no-brainer. xAPI is its packaging standard.
And that's like, I'm just going to put the bow on it. And I know Paul Schneider's in here, and Paul has been hanging out with me in the before times when we could go to conferences and have expos and all that stuff. When everybody goes off to their sessions, I go over and I kind of roam around and talk to other vendors and whatnot, and hang out at the Domino booth, and I have all my friends. But then I also go and I go to new. I go to new vendors I haven't seen before, and I get a demo of their tool. And it used to be, so this is hilarious, right? It used to be, I'd say, oh, this is really awesome. Does this send data as xAPI? And I actually had one guy say, lady, we do all the APIs. Any API you want. And I'm like, hey, don't call me lady. And I mean, it was just this preposterous answer, right? Now, that was 5 to 7 years ago. The answer I get now is often, or used to get last year, was either, yes, let me show you.
Yeah.
And Art Workentine and I actually wrote an article this spring in the response actually to somebody from Cohort's question about how do I evaluate a vendor, right? Because it's like, yes, I want to see what data you're sending. And the other, a good hunk of them say it's on the roadmap. So when we talk to you and you're like, well, yeah, this seemed obvious, was so interesting from an industry movement perspective to, from the lady, we can do all the APIs to, yeah, it was obvious, which was awesome. So thank you.
Yeah. No, that's unfortunate. I mean, because you just assume in a cloud world that everything's supposed to interoperate. And sure, you can always say call the API, but that's still not a handshake. I mean, a handshake comes from both ends. And you want a standard way that two systems talk to each other with some semantic richness. So you know a bit about what it's about. And that's what's really key. And so I'm really glad that you guys are playing with it. We always love feedback. We're always looking at adding more data points. The next thing coming for Neuro is not only are we going to send what happens in the room, but because Neuro collects a Neuro window on top or tab, we can start sending person lost focus, they regained focus, person lost focus. And we can tell you, are they actually watching you, or are they playing with Facebook or Farmville or whatever they used to play
with? That's very exciting and also a little bit creepy. But,
yeah, right. So, you have to use it. I'm just saying, hey.
Thank you so much, Jeff. There are a few questions in the chat. If you wanted to, we're going to keep the program moving along, but they have some specific Kaltura questions if you wanted to adjust them in the chat.
I think I need different permissions. I can't see the chat for some reason.
It
might be because of the playlist. How about that?
Let me try getting rid of that.
Yeah, we might have to call text.
There we go. Okay, got it. Yes, I got it. It's all good. I will answer. And guys, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm always happy to come and tell stories mostly true.
No, thanks for being here. That was really, really insightful. I hope that everybody got some good use case. So what I'm going to do is go back to our presentation. we're going to hop into team updates. So lots of folks are here to share out their team updates this week, which is great. I'm going to pull up our team GitHub. We only have a few teams that currently have their GitHub ready, which is perfectly fine. At this point, we are only in our second week of sharing out team updates, and we have a few more weeks. Last week in the team status, the weekly status report that goes out on Fridays every week about, there was a video that walked you through all of the GitHub information produced by our production team here. So if you have questions about GitHub or even where to find the status, the weekly status updates, I'm going to walk you through that today. So what I'm going to do is share my screen. And pull up the GitHub page to show you some things. Okay. So we have 4 teams that currently have GitHub pages, but then I will hop back into the presentation and I have all the other teams listed. So everyone who is giving out a report should be unmuted by our production team. Thank you for letting us know who's speaking out. For Team Down Under, I'm sure that they're not on the call today, and I didn't see them in the chat say that there was going to be someone to share out their report. They did a lot of team delegation last week, focused on thinking about what is the app going to look like, what is the app going to use. What they're doing is creating an application that's going to marry emergency services, the real-time data with geolocation check-ins using xAPI. And so they have a person working on the app. They have someone looking into the module. They have someone looking to reach out to emergency contacts. They're developing personas, and they're developing the module concept for learning. So if you're interested in working with some folks from Australia and learning more about using xAPI for emergency services, this might be the team for you. Remember, it's never too late to join cohort or join a team. Team Early Childhood Education, I think I did see Joanne on, if we wanted to have Joanne give the update.
Okay, hi. Jess, could you do me a favor and scroll down to the pictures for my update? Or, oh, you can't do that, right? To show the pictures that I had? No, right?
Is it in the, did you put them in GitHub?
It's in GitHub, yeah. Because I just thought it's easier to, oh yeah, because that's last week's, yeah, that was last week's, yeah, this is the, and then could you scroll down? I'm sorry, it's just easier for the pictures, yeah, and keep going down. Keep going down. Yeah. All right, right there. Yeah, and then if you could just go, because then I just think it'd be easier for me to talk through the pictures. All right. So what I want to do is I'm from early childhood education, and I want to be able to capture nature play. I really feel like kids should be outdoors, and it's like it really poses challenges. And then just like from what Jeff said, it's like how can we then give these companies the business case that we'll be able to measure, and you'll be able to go up into the skill sets. We'll be able to prove that you're getting the education that you need to by going through this nature play. And so I'm working with the different groups, and what I did in the past was I struggled with the technologies and everything. So what I've tried to do with this is really take all the technologies that we've worked on through the ECE and just like make it down to the very basic minimum so that it's very accessible to everyone. And so I even like started up the, I think it's Veracity, LRS, and there's, if you look in the GitHub and everything like that, everything's there already set up, so you don't have to worry about that. And then just could you go down to the next, just go down. So what I'm trying to focus on, so if you see, what I did is I built a thing out in Twine. And so what you'll be able to do is once you get the files, you'll be able to see that, but you'll be able to click through. And above that, what I'm trying to do is align with the standards. And so that's what Jeff was just talking about. I come from Pearson, and it's very important that we have interoperability. And so we're able to talk from, whether you're doing a worksheet, whether you're doing something outside, whether you're doing something here, and it all has to come together. And so that's a problem that I'm really looking at. And I really want help with that. But it's like, if here's like the CAS model, and I'm also looking at the game-based learning, because that really goes into the Common Core. But what anybody could do is like click on this, and it's sending statements as it is right now. And so you can click on it, you can play with it, and it's already sending statements. And then what I've tried to do is include audio, video, text, everything. So it's like whatever anybody's interested in. So if the next image 4, is a QR code. And so it's like, again, like we've used QR codes. And so if you click on this QR code, it's going to activate a video, and the video is set up. So it's just right now, it's just initializing, start or play and complete. But the code from all the classes that have been recommended, we have that. And then it's like we could add in all the touch points. And there's different timestamps in this demo video that I'd like to collect on and then do like a test. And then image 5 is the Makey. We worked on the Makey team last. And so again, like I just wanted to show people, here's the basic Makey, how you would do it. And then the code is there. And again, like we just started with, where you just click on the right arrow, left arrow, and then you could hook up with Brian's team, and he can help you, like, how do we, work through all these statements. And then if you go down, that's the veracity that's already there. And so what I'd really like to do is get help with people who could help me get the Twine uploaded. I'm getting error messages because it's not, there's legacy problems with Twine and things like that with JavaScript. And so there's certain things that I'd like to do. I haven't been collecting user, but then it's like, I'd like to be able to set that in. So if anybody's testing, I can get, really good test data. So I need project managers, I need designers, I need lots of help. And it's like, I try to make it as accessible as possible. So, help out. I'd love to have, people join, and anything I could do to help everybody. Oh, I forgot about adapted learning. Adapted learning, we're working with the adapted learning team. And again, like that's where the Twine that you saw before is, it's just little modules. And so then that's where with learning with adapted learning, we could just take those boxes, and then just say, okay, here's one learning path, here's another learning path, and we can test on that. So, here's all the files. They're files that were built on from previous cohorts, and it's just, everybody take it, critique it, help others, get up and running. And if there's anything I could do, just let me know.
Awesome.
Okay, have fun. It's really good.
Thank you, Joanne. All right, our next team, I didn't see anyone from Storyline Engagement, and I don't see an update for this week. Oh, yep, here it is. So they determined what storyline interactions they want to track, and they have broken up into research teams to figure out what statements can be developed, and they are looking to work with Watershed. Sharon, are you giving? Yes, this is your team. Do you want to give the update for Team Storyline Engagement?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Yes. So we met yesterday, and we determined some of the items that we wanted to track using elements that we will build within Storyline, such as video clips. If individuals or learners are scrubbing through the video clips, how many times they're watching the video clips, if they're rewinding the videos. So we're looking at that, duration time spent on a particular slide. If the learning has embedded links, we're trying to determine if learners are actually using those links, because as you know, when we're building content and Storyline, we provide a lot of resources. So it would be helpful to know if those resources are indeed impactful, if learners are using that. So such as PDF files, and if we have hotspots, are they actually going to those hotspots? If we have words or things that they can hover over, are they actually doing that? So that was part of the thinking and why we're looking to do that. Each team has been assigned a particular element or storyline interaction that they're interested in. And if there's anyone that's interested in other interactions, please join and speak up, and we could add that to our list. So we're looking to determine what statements can be developed. We kind of identified that watershed would be the LRS that we would like to use. So I think in another meeting, there was some mention if we're interested in watershed to let you guys know, because something has to be set up or done special. And then we were thinking that we were looking to use information that was not proprietary. So we figured that we could use for our video clips, go to the CDC and use some COVID videos, unless someone in the group has other videos, but we figured that would be something of interest as well. Areas where the team may need support. I only can speak for myself. I'm new to this, so I don't know what I don't know, but I know there's a lot out there that I don't know. So any suggestions, we're open for suggestions. I'll put it out there. What you hope to accomplish in the next week, a clear understanding of the elements and interactions that can be tracked. Start building our base storyline template and actually obtaining some actual video clips.
Awesome. Thank you, Sharon. If anybody has any feedback on team storyline engagement, feel free to hop into that Slack channel. And then we have Team Zoom. Brian, I believe that you're on the line to give that update. Brian, was it Brian Wanzer? All right. Some things that they accomplished this week is they determined that. There you are, Brian. Go ahead. I heard you.
All right. Hi, Jess. So we had a couple of team meetings over the last couple of weeks and really sort of decided on what our scope of this project is going to look like. The first being getting some basic information about participants joining and leaving Zoom calls. So getting that information from the Zoom API and then sending xAPI statements about that. And then we also want to dive a little bit deeper and see if we can get some engagement information about if people were speaking during the meeting and how often they were speaking and how much time they spent. So we're looking at some what's possible within Zoom API, really the chat transcript that recordings give us, and then being able to sort of figure out that information, parse it out, and then be able to provide a sort of participation score, if you will, of how often people were engaged. So upcoming, now that we've figured that out, we're ready to get started, really start to dive into some of the code in the API and start sending some statements.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. If you want to hop in, you can hop into that. What I'm going to do is transition back to our slide deck. We have a few more teams. I think I heard Brian Duck on the line here to talk about Team Makey.
Are you hearing?
Yes, I can hear you, Brian.
I'll go ahead and while you're switching over. So on Team Makey, we had a few people check into the Slack channel and have published a poll in Slack to determine the best meeting date and time for early next week. Basically, we're looking at Monday through Wednesday and asking AM or PM because of the time zone. So I'm also asking what time zone people are in. And I'm also in the process of updating videos, uploading videos to YouTube and updating the GitHub with some of the meeting materials from last cohort. So I want people to be able to go through and see where the project is at. And that's the easiest way to do that is to sort of review some of the details there. And I'm thinking with our kickoff meeting next week, part of that process will be to sort of review quickly where the project is at and what we're able to share in terms of code in GitHub, so people can see that as a starting point. And one of the starting points I mentioned before is that in discuss-dev-live code, it's not really a project group, but people have expressed interest in seeing what live code project was put together for Makey. So I'm also asking that group if people are interested, what time they have available, what their meeting preferred meeting time would be.
Awesome.
That's it for me.
Thanks, Brian. I think we have Kristen with Team Pebble next. Kristen, if you're still on the line. If not, the last person is Jim with Team HR Open. All right, Kristen, you want to go ahead for Team Pebble?
Well, I think my mic's not working. If you
I
can't
hear
hear
you.
me.
I can hear
Good.
you.
Okay, phew. So Team Pebble got started a bit late, but we are working on creating an ebook about the xAPI cohorts, how to kind of get started in the cohort in order to test out the statements that Pebble can send, as well as the dashboard that can be created with those statements. So we have a storyboard that's in our GitHub update, and I'll put that in our channel as well if you're interested. And our goal next week is just to turn that storyboard into a Pebble book. And then we'll ask everyone to test it. So get ready for us to need help, but we don't need help quite yet.
Awesome. Thank you. And then our last team is Jim for Team HR Open Standards Assessment WG. And I can see you. Perfect. Go ahead.
Can you hear me too? Okay, excellent. Okay, so how cool it is, to be. Megan mentioned it earlier, a part of the, the intersection of HR Open Standards and learning, and how xAPI is the technology that really enables us to do that. But for our update, we've started a data dictionary. It's pretty rough draft, but we've got one started, and we're going to go over it tomorrow and maybe expand it a little bit more. And we'll continue to work on use cases. We're going to be able to document our use cases and our data dictionary and put those in GitHub. And we'll make sure that we share those updates, our weekly meeting updates, through the Slack channel. Of course, anybody's welcome. Please feel free to join us. Our weekly meetings are on Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern time. The Zoom link is in the Slack channel, or just send us notes through Slack, and we're happy to be in the cohort. And it's really neat to be building and working on an xAPI profile.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jim.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, so I think that we got through all the teams who had folks here to present, and we are about to be right at the top of the hour, so perfect timing. We just want to remind you, we're here every week at 2 p.m. Our link to our Kaltura live room is there. Next week, we're talking all about profiles, so that was a really great transition, Jim. So you'll learn about using xAPI profiles with Jason and Aaron. Our xAPI party registration and call for proposals is open every week. That will be in your weekly update. So you can get those links in the weekly update that's emailed to your inbox. If you are not getting the weekly emails in your inbox, please check your spam, send me a message, and also add the xAPI cohort as a listed contact. I put that information in our Slack channel, so that way the emails can not go to your spam folder. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. This week in your weekly update, we're going to walk you through the website, so that way you can find where all of the previous weekly updates are housed. They're all on our website under our How It Works tab. So if you're looking for those emails and you haven't received them, you can just go to our xapicohort.com website and click on How It Works and find that. With that, we're right at 3:00 p.m. Thank you for being here this Thursday. Now get out there and make something.